3 seconds left on the clock. He gets the ball at the 3-point line. He shoots. He scores. North Carolina wins the game. That's one of the many different endings that could happen in a basketball game. Today, I want to talk to you about basketball. I want to start by dribbling down the court with the history of basketball. Then, I'll pass the ball off to some of the calls made in a game. And finally, I want to shoot the buzzer shot to win the game with the defensive plays. Now it's time to start to dribble down the court with the history of basketball. Basketball was invented in 1891 by James Naismith. James worked at the Young Men's Christian Association training school, which he was instructed to invent a winter sport that you play indoors. According to the history of basketball, the first team had 9 players on it, and they shot soccer balls into peach baskets. The first pro league that was invented was the National Basketball League, which was invented in 1898, which later, down the road 5 years, ended up closing down. But it reopened in 1937. And another league that opened up about 9 years later was the Basketball Association of America, which in 3 years then merged with the National Basketball League in 1949 to form the National Basketball Association, or the NBA. Now it's time to pass off to some of the calls made in a game. The first set of calls that could be called in a game are called violations. These are called when the offensive player does something to turn over the ball. According to Urch, in his web article, traveling is the first sign of a violation. So when you have a basketball, you dribble, you stop dribbling, and you end up moving your feet. Another violation called in a game is double dribbling. That's when you dribble, stop, and dribble again. Or it could be when you dribble with 2 hands. A third type of violation is called 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, there is a rectangle, which is made up of 2 lines with the free throw line and the baseline. When the player stands inside this rectangle for 3 seconds, the ball is turned over. The second set of calls that can be made in a game are called fouls. A foul is when an offensive player or defensive player does something illegal to his opponent. According to basketballplaysandtips.com, blocking is one of the most common fouls. It's when the defensive player steps in the pathway of the offensive player who's dribbling up the ball and the defensive player's feet are still moving. Another foul that's called in a game is holding. Holding is when the defensive player either grabs the shirt, the arm, or anywhere else but the ball. And that's when the defensive player is getting called on. The third foul I'll tell you about is on the offense though. It's when the person with the ball is dribbling down the court and runs into a defensive player that is standing still. It's pretty much just the opposite of blocking. There are much more violations and fouls that could be called in a game. Now, I want to talk to you, or I want to shoot the buzzer shot to win the game with the defensive plays. There are 2 types of formations the defense can play. One is man-to-man. The second is zone defense. According to the coach's clipboard, if you have fast players for defense, you should play man-to-man. This is especially good when your opponent has good outside shooters, because your defensive team will cause them to take a quick shot and more than likely miss. The second, zone defense, is if you have a slower team. And according to Winters, the most common one is 2-3. 2-3 defense is played when we have two players at the top of the free throw line, here and here. You have three players lined up along the bottom. Another play is 3-2. It's just the opposite of 23. You just flip them. The second or the third one is 2-1-2. 2-1-2 is when you have just the same as 2-3, but your middle guy will follow the post player around the rectangle. The last most common zone defense play is 1-3-1. That's when you have a defensive player at the top of the key, three lined up along the middle, along the free throw line, and one that runs the baseline. But there is still another type. It's a mixture of zone defense and man-to-man. It's called box and one. That's when you have four players lined up on the four corners of the rectangle, and one man will chase the opponent's best player in the man-to-man defense. Today, I dribbled up the court with the history of basketball. I passed the ball off with some of the calls made in the game. And finally, I took the buzzer shot to win the game with the defensive plays in basketball. Now that you know the calls, I hope you enjoy watching basketball on TV more or go to the games. Even better yet, get some friends and start a game up yourself.